stop delaying Brexit. Boris Johnson urges swift end to two-year transition deal. The Foreign Secretary made his latest intervention on the eve of the Tory party conference, setting out his red lines for the Brussels negotiations. Theresa May set out plans for a two-year Brexit transition period this week, sparking anger from hardline Brexiteers amid fears Britain's EU exit will be delayed indefinitely. Mr. Johnson insisted the UK should not have to abide by any new EU rules during the transition period, and no payments should be made after it to stay in the single market. He warned the UK must not agree to shadow EU rules to gain access to the single market either. The Foreign Secretary told The Sun there should be no monkeying around over leaving the bloc. Mr. Johnson said, "Am I impatient about it? Do I want to get it done as fast as possible? Yes, absolutely. Do I want the delay to go on longer than 2 years? Not a second more." The Leave campaigner said Brexit is going to be great and warned Remain owners the process was unstoppable. In the same interview, Mr. Johnson called for an increase in the minimum wage for hard-working Brits that claimed speculation about a leadership bid had been massively overdone. His comments come just weeks after he was accused of backseat driving by setting out his personal vision for Brexit just before the Prime Minister gave her landmark speech in Florence. During that speech, Mrs. May announced a two-year transition period when the UK leaves in 2019. But Scottish Conservative leader Ruth Davidson warned today against over-optimism over Britain's future outside the EU and called for serious people to take charge of the process in what looked like a criticism of Mr. Johnson and David Davis. She told The Times, "I think optimism, positivity is good. I think over-optimism and not recognizing that there are practical realities that have to be faced, that have to be worked through, and that complexity is not something you just skip over, that you actually have to work through, I think sells people short." The moves came as a letter to the Prime Minister from senior pro-Brexit Tory MPs and business figures in the Leave group said the UK should threaten no deal with Brussels. Their letter stated, "If the EU is not seriously negotiating a free trade deal by Christmas 2017, the government should give formal notice that we will move to World Trade Organization rules in March 2019. Signatories calling for the hardline stance include former Brexit Minister David Jones, and the issue is set to feature heavily at the Tory conference. Mrs. May, who has tried to tighten her grip on the Brexit process in recent days, will attempt to reassert control on her party at this week's conference in Manchester. The Prime Minister insisted Labour was unfit to govern as she pledged to listen to the concerns of young voters after the Tories lost their Commons majority in the snap general election in June. Mrs. May said, "As Conservatives, we have a vision of a country that works for everyone, not just the privileged few, precisely the direction I set when I became Prime Minister last year. I understand the concerns raised, particularly by young people, during what was a disappointing election for my party. So my determination to act on those concerns, and crucially, to fulfill the promise of my first speech on the steps of Downing Street, is greater than ever." Mrs. May added the conference would see the party setting out our road to a better future for you and your family. She said, "Yes, we have to get the best Brexit deal, but we must also take action here at home to make this a fairer place to live for ordinary working people. The social contract in our country is that the next generation should always have it better than the last. Conservatives have a plan to make that a reality."